Alright, you guys are pretty. You guys are sexy. I've had a couple Lone Star Renos. This next story is not your favorite Jim Carrey movie. It's called Liar Liar. And it'll be told by Timothy James Wood. Is that your middle name too?
Yes, it is.
Oh, you're good.
Story's kind of long. I'm gonna do it justice. Alright. Story's called Liar Liar. My mother taught me to be honest. She drilled into me how important it was to have people's trust and how honesty was the only way to obtain that trust. Unfortunately, as an adult, I've learned my mother is a big, fat liar. The largest lie she would ever tell would probably be her 13 years of sobriety. It would have been 18 years had she not fallen off the wagon 5 years into it. I can no longer go into her annual AA birthday meetings and buy her stupid little cards for her yearly anniversary of her life-changing sobriety. The reason for this lie is because my mother is not an alcoholic. She has never been an alcoholic. It isn't that I have a problem accepting that my mom might be an alcoholic. My first father was a drunk, Dad 2.0, a pill popper, and had to go to rehab. My brother was a crackhead, my sister a big pothead, my aunt a drunk, my cousin a drunk. I can accept that we are a family of addicts in one form or another. My mother, however, is not a drunk. My parents came to pick me up from my dorm on my Christmas break, my first year of college. And my mother took me to lunch to break the news of her having decided to get sober and go to AA meetings several times a week. I just replied, "Congratulations?" My newlywed parents moved us to Texas when I was 7. The house had a wet bar. My parents, not understanding that my dad was socially retarded and my mother was a petty harpy, stocked the bar with liquor, wine, and fantasies about fabulous parties that would give free-flowing liquor and ideas, and knowing my mother, probably sex. When my mother declared she was an alcoholic, she gathered up all those dusty bottles that had only been touched by my teenage sister over the previous 12 years, put them in a garbage bag, and gave them away. Didn't throw them away, gave them away. My mother tells stories of the bottle of Jack that sat on top of the fridge for years as proof of her drinking problem. And my sister and I recall that same bottle of Jack. Children of alcoholics notice things like that, like a bottle of booze just hanging out in the kitchen. The bottle was noted, the level marked and checked weekly, and not a sip was taken from that bottle, ever. Hold, please. Continue. I found out later that what happened was my mother was easily 450 pounds and seeing a therapist. A few months into therapy, my mother's therapist said, "It's time to address your food addiction. You have an eating disorder and we need to start digging into this." My mother's response was to stop seeing that therapist and start going to AA. She didn't misunderstand when the doctor said OA. She just didn't want to deal with it. Therapy is hard. It is painful. Quitting drinking when you don't have a drinking problem, easy peasy. She's actually an AA rock star. People know her far and wide. Sobriety just seemed to come so easy to her. She goes to various meetings a few times a week. She sponsors the newer members to AA. She holds some regional chair in AA politics. She travels all over the state giving talks and lectures and sharing her story. She manages to not spend time with her grandson, be there if her daughters need to talk or ask for emotional support, but boy howdy will she drive to the ends of the earth for any junkie with 5 seconds of sobriety. When we bring up anything from our childhood, like when my father was punching my sister in the stomach, or trying to put my head through a wall, or a neighbor molesting me, she will mention that she cannot recall that, and it must have been while she was drinking. It'd be bad enough to have a mother to not stand up for you and protect you, but when to blame it on a non-existent drinking problem, it just gets surreal. We were at a Starbucks with my parents and my son and one of the mother's AA friends. Actually, all her friends are in AA. She has none outside of AA. And my mother is telling us this story about how when she and her friend were at a meeting, she finally came clean about a story she told them all years before her being a novice. For those non-Catholics out there, a novice is like a nun in training. She had a photograph she showed us when she was a novice, except she never was a novice. My sister and I yelled out, "What? What do you mean you weren't a novice?" And she looked a bit shocked and said, did I tell you all that story too? Again, in unison replied, "Yes, you did. We told all our friends this nifty little story about my mother wanting to be a nun, then changing her mind, meeting my father, and having me. I always found it fascinating. And I suppose that's why she told the story. She wanted to be fascinating. But she was not fascinating. She is, however, a liar." I cannot believe anything she says. It's like having a teenage son for a mother. Every time she tells me a story, in my head I'm thinking, yeah, right. She told me a few years ago that her father molested her with a baby bottle when she was an infant. Repressed memory. Whatever. I call it repressed crazy. She generally keeps it together pretty well, and the people who see her as competent and bright. But those of us that know her knows that she is just a big, fat liar. The end.